First of all, lay the panel on the ground and then unpack it from the carton, turning it over and laying it face down. We then need to connect a stabilising bar to the back of the panel. The stabilising bar is also inside the packaging, located at the foot of the panel. We next put the brackets on the rear of the panel, then insert the stabilising bar through the brackets and then secure it in position with Tek screws. The next step is to connect the solid piece of ducting to the rear of the panel. This piece of solid ducting is also known as the pop. Attach the cable gland, making sure that the long section of the cable gland is protruding towards the inside of the pop. Attach the temperature sensor to the bracket on the inside of the pop so that the temperature sensor is facing downwards inside the panel. Attach the pop to the panel, making sure that there's an airtight seal. Firstly, put a generous bead of silicone around the flange of the pop, then secure it in position using evenly spaced Tek screws. The next stage is to mount the SolaMate panel on the roof. The first step is to actually mark out the hole for the roof penetration. Use the plastic flashing sheet provided as a template to mark out the hole, and before cutting the hole, confirm and check that there are no rafters or battens beneath. The easiest way to cut out the hole through the tin is to use a nibbler fitting on the end of a drill. If you don't have this tool, a pair of tin snips will be sufficient. Attach the mount brackets and the support rubbers to the ends of the mount rails before securing the mount rails to the roof. Attach the plastic flashing sheet to the roof above the roof penetration, taking care to make sure that there are no obstructions beneath the flashing sheet when it's secured. The mount rails are attached directly onto the battens on a tin roof. Before securing the rail onto the roof, we need to remove the line of screws along the batten, place some silicone over the screw holes, and then replace the screws through the rail and secure it down onto the roof. It's also quite important to actually put a few new screws into fresh timber and don't just rely on the old screws going back into the original holes. Once the mount rails are secured into position, it's time to lift the SolaMate panel up onto the roof. The best way to do this is for two people at ground level to lift the panel up and pass it to two people who are already on the roof. The panel is then lowered into position. The mount brackets on the end of the rails can then be finger tightened in place. We then put a Tek screw through the top of each of the brackets and screw them to the SolaMate panel itself before tightening the nuts and locking the mount brackets into position. With the panel firmly secured in position, the last step on top of the roof is to screw the weather shield flashing sheet into position above the panel. This prevents any water from running down the roof, underneath the panel and through the roof penetration. The next stage is to prepare the air handling kit items at ground level. First of all, insert the filter inside the filter housing, and then connect the filter housing to the fan and the inlet duct to the fan inlet. To minimise work and time spent inside the roof cavity, it's useful to assemble as many items as possible at ground level. Typically we assemble the fan, the filter housing and the inlet duct as one assembly, and then we assemble the outlet ducts to the three-way branch piece as another assembly before lifting them into the roof. Once the positions of the ceiling outlet have been determined, use the template provided on the back of the ceiling diffuser box to mark out the hole from inside the room. Then, using a hand saw, simply cut the hole in the plaster, ready for the ceiling outlets to be fixed. Once the air handling kit components are lifted into the ceiling cavity, the first step is to secure and mount the fan and filter housing items in position. One good tip is to first of all mount a piece of plywood or craft wood in position on top of the rafters, and then the fan and filter housing can be bolted onto a firm platform. We then connect the inlet duct to the solid ducting which is penetrating through the roof from the panel. We also need to make sure that the metal tabs on the solid duct are folded out and that the wire stiffening rib on the internal sleeve of the ducting is hooked behind these tabs. Once the internal sleeve is taped in position, it's also important to use the large cable tie provided to lock the tape in position. The three-way branch piece is then connected to the outlet of the filter housing. Each of the three outlet ducts is then spread out across the roof and run to the position where the ceiling outlet holes have been cut. Inside the rooms, the outlet ducts can be trimmed to length before the ceiling outlets are taped to the end of the ducting and then pushed up and locked into position. Back in the ceiling, the cable from the duct temperature sensor, the power cable from the fan, and the signal cable from the wall-mounted thermostat controller can all be connected to the fan control box, which is then plugged into a power point and activated. The last step in the process is to mount the SolaMate thermostat controller on the wall. The signal cable for the controller is first fed down through the wall. It is then connected to the backing plate for the thermostat controller. The backing plate is then screwed to the wall. And finally, the front fascia plate is connected and locked into position. As soon as this is done, the control panel will light up and the system is active, and the installation of your SolaMate system is complete.